Okay, I will steal a minute and start a bit early by asking, can you please raise your hand if you have any connection to Fate system, that you've played it, you have even read rules, you've heard about the rules? About half has some kind of connection, which means that we're going to use some time to go through the basic mechanics so you can at all understand what I'm talking about at a later stage when I say basically why I like it, why I like those mechanics. These are the current books that are kind of up to date. Technically, we're talking about the 4th edition of Fate at the moment, and Condensed came later. It was a bit of a surprise publish. I think the Evil Hats, which is the publisher, they kind of recognized that their book is quite long to be light. It's more than 200 pages, so they just rewrote everything into a new book, but the rules themselves did not really change, even though then for some reason they still changed few details here and there. But basically these all are the same edition with the difference that you have the core, which is the whole system, and with normal kind of like a skill set. And then you have the accelerated, which is pretty much the same system. You just replace the skills with approaches. So you have only a few approaches, and you can, based on the narrative description of how things are done or what is being done, which of the approaches you use. It's a bit lighter, easier, especially to get into the system, try it in a one-shot or something. And the Condensed is basically the whole system just rewritten in a new way. So if you want to get into the system, most likely you should try the accelerated as a one-shot or kind of a mini campaign. That's the easy way you get all the things what makes Fate Fate, but it's a bit simpler to start with. Then how to get into the system, maybe the Condensed is the easiest way to read the rules. It's the most compact version. And then when you want to get into it a bit more, the core has basically how the core is written is that it tells the rules, and then it uses a kind of a campaign example to everything, and it uses the same campaign. So it's kind of like you have the same characters, and now the characters are in different kind of situations and are doing different things. So it has more examples. It has gazillion different kind of other releases which uses Fate. It has tools boxes, it has settings. They had this kind of publishing system where they were releasing kind of like a new mini setting book, which would be something like, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 pages long, like every 2 months, I think. So there are like, I don't even know, maybe 100, maybe more than 100 setting books out there. And then there are these toolboxes which helps you to they show different approaches, how you can customize Fate to different kinds of settings or kind of like make it crunchier, because at its base it doesn't have much mechanical crunch. So different ways you can add crunch, different approaches. But there's a lot of material out there. Some of it is free, most of it is cheap. Here's kind of like their view of the whole system at year something. And it has the the kind of the versions, Fate 1, Fate 2, it came from Fudge. Basically, Fudge was a system of its own, and they just stole the core dice mechanics and then built on top of Fudge and created Fate from that. This is just to represent a little bit of the idea that there is a lot in there and you can do almost anything with Fate. It all builds on top of the same foundation, but it starts to kind of like feel different. It always feels the same, it feels Fate, but it can easily be customized to almost any setting or genre. On the left side, you're on the left side, you have kind of like the core mechanics that we're going to go through today first. You have the aspects. You have skills, you have stunts, and then you have, when you want to do something, there are actions and the outcomes for those actions. And then you have basically different kinds of damage, which is stress and consequences. Aspects are basically short sentence. Usually they like to use this kind of clever word plays or funny sounding short sentences, but they don't have to be. Sucker for a pretty face, for example, is an example of this. You can write them down in a more concise and a clear way. This is just how they're usually presented in the books. Their point is especially that they state something about the world or its characters. So anything can have aspects. The most clear example, of course, is the character, your character play, PCs. They will have multiple aspects describing what they are and who they are. And those aspects, whether they're character aspects or world aspects or scene aspects, their number one ability is to express some kind of truth about the world. As an example, you can have a high concept. A high concept is a special kind of an aspect. It tells more about what that character is. So, for example, you can have a high concept which tells that you are the prince of a kingdom X, Y, Z. By stating in your high concept that this character really is a prince, everything that comes with that fact that you are a prince is now true. Most systems would either ignore all those kind of how they would affect things, or they would have some kind of mechanics behind it. For example, a prince probably, first of all, there has to be a kingdom. A prince has servants. Prince has decision-making power. Prince is probably quite rich. They have all sorts of resources available, and so on. But fate does not provide any mechanics to those. They just, since you're a prince, you're a prince. So anything that makes sense, anything that comes automatically from the fact that in your setting you are a prince, then that's how it is. And that can sound to someone who has come from a very kind of a gamey mechanic, like overpowered. How can I suddenly have this wealth or these servants or this power status for free? Because what if this other piece is they're a beggar? How can it be balanced? The first thing about fate is that it doesn't care. It's there to provide a basically interesting narrative, not balance. And the other is that it understands those aspects as a whole picture instead of just the good things. Easily you think about only kind of D&D context, which is adventuring, which is dangerous situations, fighting. You need equipment, you need magical potions, etc. So everything that comes with the fact that you're a prince is positive, mainly. But in Fate, it's not like that. It's far more broad. Being a prince means that everybody knows you. Being a prince means that your country probably has competitors. You have a lot of, there are a lot of people out there who might want to hurt you. Being a prince means that you need to kind of present yourself in a certain way, etc. Going as a prince to the streets, people will not be treating you like a normal person. They will not be telling you any negative things because you're the prince. They're afraid, etc. Being a prince is not just a bag of good things. Being a prince is being a prince and everything that comes with it in Fate. When it comes to more game mechanics, you have two things called invoking and compelling. Anything that doesn't automatically tell us how things either should be or shouldn't be, thanks to the aspect being truth, requires usually an invocation. That gives a modifier to any roles that you're making. And then you're telling that because I'm a prince, therefore I should either get a bonus to this situation if it's a good thing, or a penalty if it's a bad thing, someone else is invoking it against you. That's invoking. And compelling is basically someone wants to create a complication. The fact that you are a prince. Now, for example, the GM could decide that, or kind of like have an idea that, hey, wouldn't it be fun that in this situation that you're kind of like the competitor of your country, they have sent an agent to complicate your prince's life. So they compel the fact that you are a prince and bring a complication to the character. That is compelling. Those are basically what aspects do. The most important being that it really is a narrative fact, whatever the aspect says. Then you have skills. The skill list in Fates is designed to be customized for your setting. So obviously you're not going to have actually here we don't have so complicated crafts. What does it mean? It can be divided into different kinds of crafts if that is important. What is driving? Maybe in their setting there is no driving at all. In another it could be piloting. It's more important that you're flying starship or whatever. You can, if it's about using computers, maybe you have a skill about that. It's supposed to be customized for the setting. And any of those setting books, they usually are customized to some degree. Stunts are here because usually stunts somehow change how those skills work. Most simple being that when you do something in certain kind of situation, you get a plus to your roll. So for example, you're a soldier and you're used to fighting against multiple opponents simultaneously. So when you are fighting against more than one opponent, for example, you get +1 to your defend rolls in melee, for example, a stunt. Sometimes they can say that, okay, because of XYZ, you have the stunt basically, you can replace one skill with another skill. For example, how does D&D's sneak attack work? Can be done in many different ways in Fate. It could be when you attack kind of like an opponent who is not aware of you, you get +2. Or you could say that when you attack an opponent that is not aware of you, instead of using your fighting skill, you're using your sneak skill to do that attack, for example. And then it can do any other sort of things that is relevant in your campaign. For example, if you use a magic system that builds on top of the basic mechanics, then maybe you require stunts. You need stunts to get spells or some other special abilities, capabilities. So stunts are kind of like feats and anything in other systems that is built on top of the core mechanics. Actions and outcomes. You have 4 actions. You have attacking. It's always an attack if you're trying to deal damage / somehow prevent someone from any more influencing the scene. So this does not mean just punching people in the face. It can also mean a social conflict. So in order to win an argument, for example, that can be done with a conflict where you're attacking. The outcome is that you deal certain kind of stress or other physical or mental or social damage to the opponent. And you're trying to take them out, which means that they no longer are able to influence the scene. So you get to choose what happens, basically. Normal fight would be that you punch them out. They're knocked out, unconscious, or they're dead, so they no longer can affect what is going on, so you can choose that I'm going to take the gold now. You have overcome. Overcome is literally overcoming any obstacle. This can range from physical obstacles. You're trying to go over a fence. It's an overcome action. Someone has taken hold of you, and you're trying to get out of that. You're trying to overcome that you're being crippled. You're trying to overcome the fact that for example, there is fire here. You want to get on the other side safely. You're going to overcome the fire. You're going to put it out. Overcome is anything where you have a very kind of binary outcome if you succeed. Something that happens and it goes away, the problem. Defending is very clear situation. It's not kind of the active parasitism, it's the reactive who defends. So if someone attacks you, you defend. If someone is trying to overcome something that you're actively doing, you defend. Create advantage action is the most complex but simultaneously the most used action in Fate. It is about, mechanically it is about creating aspects, but narratively it is about changing something. So any special maneuvers, any way to change the environment, the scene is probably a create advantage action. You want to trip someone, that's a create advantage action. You want to daze someone, that's a create advantage action. You want to put the carpet on fire, that's a create advantage action. Anything that isn't dealing damage and is not overcoming an obstacle is probably a create advantage action. Then you have 4 and kind of technically 5 outcomes. If you fail the target number, in normal situation, kind of like what you tried to do did not happen. You try to attack someone, they defend, they didn't take any damage. Tie, something that is in most systems don't exist. Tie is you kind of like progressed in what you tried to do. You're getting closer to the positive outcome, but you're not quite there yet. Maybe you started hacking, but you didn't yet get in, but you did something positive, which usually gives you what is called a boost, which is a certain kind of special short-term aspect which allows you to get a bonus kind of like to the next attempt when you do the same thing. Succeeding is that you succeed in what you just did, and then succeeding by 3 or more, you succeed what you just tried to do, and on top of that, you do something extra beneficial for you, which mechanically usually is the boost. The 5th potential outcome is a situation where there are 2 active participants, and you failed by 3 or more, which means that they succeeded by 3 or more. So they succeeded with style in defending, for example, against your attacking. So that's the 5th, which creates, in normal situation, would give them a boost against you. The normal way of taking damage is kind of shifts of damage. In the most simple version or way of using Fate is that you do some kind of attack action. Whatever your number is higher than the defend number, that's how many damage you do. And that damage either needs to be absorbed with stress, which is this kind of like a narrative plot armor thing. Nothing really happened. You didn't do a cut, you didn't do a bruise, no one got hurt, but it's very stressful for them to be in that situation, so they get stress. If they cannot absorb it with stress, then you get to start causing consequences. And consequences are real things, real damage, concrete damage. It can be, again, physical. It can be a really clear thing. It's a cut, bleeding cut, broken arm. Or, of course, it can be mental, and it can even be social or financial, depending on what is your setting and campaign about. But that is something concrete, and that consequence is simultaneously an aspect. So it's kind of like a special aspect. The thing is that you have limited amount of consequences you can take before you are taken out. And taken out means simply that you can no longer affect the scene. So someone else chooses for you what's going to happen next. The special thing about Fate is that practically all systems, at least most systems, they have a way to somehow protect the PCs from dying. In D&D, it's you go to 0, you don't actually die. You start making death saves, and even if you die, you have resurrection as an alternative. In some you have some kind of fate or fortune or some kind of points you start to lose. Every time you would die, instead of dying, you lose this meta resource, etc. Fate does it a bit differently. Fate has a mechanic that the player can at any point use. They can concede. The player can concede, not the PC. So before rolling, the player can decide that, okay, I don't want my character to be taken out. So before rolling, so they know that there's a risk of being taken out. They don't yet know that they will be taken out. They can choose that I want to protect my character from this. So I concede, which means that nothing bad can anymore happen to that character. But we must change the narrative in such a way that they can also not affect the scene anymore. What that means depends on the situation, of course. This can sometimes create a bit complicated situation if you have multiple characters, of course, and first one of them concedes, but the rest continue. And then later another concedes, and then the rest continue, and then another concedes. And then it's like, it can be difficult to modify the narrative every time in a natural way if they happen like this, one after another. It's easy if we know that now they all the fight ends. It's easy. But this is how Fate basically protects the PCs. In Fate, player characters will never accidentally die. Player had to make that choice that I'm going to take the chance first. Okay, so then to the meat part. Why do I like Fate? What does it do differently from other systems? Well, first of all, nowadays it doesn't do so many things anymore so differently from other systems. It was created more than 20 years ago. So during these 20 years, we've had a lot of new systems that actually are loaning things from Fate, or actually something loaned from Fate, which loaned from that, which loaned from that, which loaned from that. And so we keep seeing stuff that was new when Fate came out is no longer so new compared to other systems. For example, the idea that it's a narrative fact, many systems have something similar. They can be called different. They're not usually called aspects. They can be called tags, for example, or similar things. So it's not, why I like Fate specifically, it comes largely from the fact that it was the first strongly narrative-focused system that I really started to use. When I started to use it, there wasn't that much competition. And then I did a lot of work into getting into the philosophy of Fate. And that's what this system really is. The mechanics I told you, they are really the core, like that's the skeleton. The core, how it works. How do you roll dice? That you have skills to begin with, you have aspects, but how do you use all that to make a whole system? That's up to you. There's a word called powered by Fate because of this. That all of these other settings, specific settings, they usually have powered by Fate written somewhere there, that it's not the Fate core, but it is basically Fate and added setting-specific things on top of it. They all are built on the principles of Fate, the philosophy of Fate, that you have narrative focus, that you have aspects that are on their own powerful and meaningful. You use the fudge die, or nowadays they're usually referred as Fate die, but basically D3, one of them is plus, one of them is minus, and one of them is empty. But the details between those systems can differ a lot. To me, the three biggest things are listed here. How aspects actually work. I struggled with this a lot. Almost every single person who comes to Fate as a new person, they've never played Fate before, and they start to play, and they're like, I read the book, I was very interested in it, I tried, and we have this and this kind of problems. They're almost always about aspects, because they function so differently with what people are used to. you see nowadays, even in more kind of like a crunchier system, similar kind of like a features, such as the D&D nowadays has backgrounds. You choose a background for your character instead of just telling a story of where they came from, who they are, and blah, 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 blah. And that has an impact to that character. But how Fate and D&D approach this is completely different. D&D says that because of this background, you get this specific skill, and you get this specific equipment, and you get this specific ability. Fate says everything that makes sense in your setting is now true. And it's difficult to get that into your backbone if you're not used to it at all. On the other hand, a lot of people are doing that already. They're implementing character backgrounds as something that drives how other NPCs react to those characters. How they can say that, hey, because you came from this land, of course you know this knowledge without a role, etc. Fate just has that as a kind of rule. It's a mechanic without rolling. Other systems, they just don't specify it necessarily the same way. But aspects do a lot more. When you do certain kinds of things with aspects, especially with create advantage action, let's say that you want to take cover. That is a complicated thing to get around, again, to understand, again, Fate mechanics. Most systems, you move on a grid to a specific square, and if there is something between you and the attacker, you are in cover. Fate generally doesn't do it like that. Fate has a large area, and you're somewhere in that area. We don't care where am I standing, here or here in Fate. There's no difference. We know that I'm in this room, I'm in the front of this room. That's enough for us. I'm moving in this area now freely. As long as nothing is preventing me from moving freely here, I can move freely. If something is preventing, there's probably an aspect which states that, which prevents me. It takes away my narrative permission to move freely. I'm entangled. Someone has grabbed me, or something like that. As long as that's not happening, I can freely move here, which means that being behind this doesn't provide me cover kind of automatically, because I'm in Fate, I'm here and there simultaneously. I could be anywhere here. So if I want to actually take cover from this, I probably use the create advantage action, which gives me the opportunity. Then we know I'm behind the cover, so that gives the automatic. What does it mean in that situation? Anything that happens automatically because I'm in cover then is applied. Anything that is impossible because I'm in cover is applied automatically. Then when we get to that we need to roll, we don't know the outcome. Then I created I used the create advantage action to create an aspect, and I can invoke that to get bonuses to my rolls. For example, bonus to my defend roll. What about when I do that action? How difficult is that action? How difficult is it for me to go behind this cover? It's a weird question to most systems, because in most systems it's just choosing which square I'm in. It gets complicated. Why doesn't it just provide me protection against that attack automatically? I'm already behind the cover, but because it doesn't defend me fully against the attacks, we make a roll. I have to invoke the aspect to get the defensive bonus. Invoking happens with fate points or free invokes. Both are finite resource. To most people, it feels maybe even unfair, but at least unrealistic, weird, strange. Why doesn't it affect all the time that I'm behind this cover? Because in Fate, first of all, it doesn't try to simulate reality. It tries to simulate kind of like interesting storytelling. It's a movie scene. Basically, everything is easier to understand as movie scenes with Fate. In movies, you have a scene. Let's say you have an action scene. In that action scene, there are a million things we don't focus on until we decide to focus on it. In a movie, we might have a scene first where we see that the protagonist puts a bottle, like a metallic whiskey bottle, to the inside pocket. And later we have a scene when they're shot. And then we see that they didn't die because actually the bullet hit the bottle and got stuck there, and they're safe. That in Fate mechanics is you invoked the aspect that you have that bottle. You have an aspect that you have a bottle, which is probably telling about your personality. Maybe you have a problem with alcohol. That's an aspect. We're telling about that. And because I have that, I have the pocket in my inside pocket. I have the bottle in my inside pocket. And now that I'm being attacked, I can choose to invoke that aspect and get a bonus to my defense. And that saved me. The narrative makes sense in a movie terms, not in simulation of reality. But it still can get confusing and difficult and feel unfair, and especially like why would I then try to go behind the cover if it doesn't provide me any benefits unless I use an action to kind of like to defend myself by going behind it, etc. And then let's jump to the gold and silver and bronze rules. The bronze rule is that it states that anything in Fate can have character-like abilities. And usually the bronze rule is the answer to any strange, weird situation when it comes, almost anything. If you feel that you need more crunch, if you feel that you need more answers, more mechanics, you use the bronze rule. In this example, for example, we have a cover here. It's an aspect. We can state that this aspect has character abilities. It can defend me. So we can choose that this cover defends me automatically with certain value. It has a skill. So if I'm being shot, it will defend me. So it gives some kind of protection automatically instead of me having to actively use my finite resources to make it relevant. There's a fire in the room. What does the fire do? Well, it does whatever is automatic. There's probably hotter here. If someone goes into the fire, what happens? It's not automatic easily. You might be burned or you might not be burned. Are you hurt or not? If it's not a finite, clear yes or no answer, the fact that the aspect mechanic that it's a narrative fact doesn't tell us automatically what will happen. We'll probably resolve it with some kind of random generation or with the dice. So what do we do at that state? We can give that fire character abilities. It can have a skill, burn. It will attack with burn anyone who comes in touch with it. When should we use this ability, this kind of the bronze rule? Fate doesn't tell us. And that confuses people. Fate says, know your setting, know your campaign, know what you're trying to achieve, know what you want to focus on. And you will know the answers. It gives you the mechanics, the tools, but it doesn't tell you how to use those tools to get the outcome that you want to have necessarily. And that is confusing until you try a lot. And I was surprised to see originally that the community, at least back in those days, it was not helpful. The community was kind of like, we have the greatest system in the world, and if you disagree, you're an idiot. You're doing it wrong. I was just asking, in my opinion, good questions, which just were difficult, and people didn't seem to have proper answers. I'm openly telling you, this is difficult, but when you get it to your backbone, how to do it, this comes super easily, because it comes from the simple philosophy that the narrative comes first. And that's the golden and silver rule. The golden and silver rule are basically, think, what are you trying to achieve? Consult the rules, how can they help you achieve it? That's the golden rule. The silver rule is, if at any point you feel that some game mechanic should be used, use it. Don't read what kind of trigger it should have. Just use it. It's that simple. Narrative takes always the priority. I've taken the golden and silver rule to every single system that I use. The bronze rule is a bit more difficult because in other systems it would cause completely different kind of outcomes. But when it comes to Fate, it really is almost always the way to solve a difficult situation I have. Then the dice. It's a D3, like I said, plus, minus, nothing. This system creates, first of all, so-called bell curve, which is kind of normal distribution with the expected value of 0. It is the most easiest dice system to understand from the perspective that if my skill is 4, I know that I will probably roll 4. I will get the result of 4. Instead of if my skill is 4 and then I start rolling d20, I have to add that, and then I start to well, what is the probable outcome? In Fate, the probable outcome of the dice is always 0. The most likely outcome is 0. But in d20, the most likely outcome is every single outcome. You will roll 5 with the same probability as you will roll 20. This is very easy to start with, and then it gives you a normal distribution, which means that you are likely to roll a 0 or close to the 0. But it also gives you a wide range of possibilities, which is from -4 to +4, which matters in Fate a lot more than in most systems, because plus or -1 is a lot bigger thing in Fate than, for example, like D20 systems. To me, this is the best dice system I've ever had, because it provides me simultaneously a lot of variations. So every roll is potentially interesting. Another system that I like a lot is called Savage Rolls, and there it has a system which also is designed to potentially have a meaningful outcome with every single roll. Fate has incorporated that philosophy with a completely different way, but it has the same philosophy. And it's the most easy to understand. What am I probably going to roll? Am I good or bad with this in this situation? Also, the numbers don't just scale up infinitely. You know from the start what +1, what +2, what +3, what +4 means. And you will not suddenly jump from +3 to +8 in your campaign, because they're completely different in scale. People are between 0 and 4, basically, in general. You know that. So if you are +3, no matter where you are in your campaign, you know that your character is good at that. If you have a stunt on top of that, you get, let's say it gives you +2, you can roll in a specific kind of situation something with a +5. You know that you're really good at that. You know that automatically. It's very intuitive. After this, I'm thinking in what way to go deeper. I want to use the last 5 minutes for questions. We have 7 minutes, so 2 minutes to do something extra. I'll go back. Aspects. Many things are aspects. They're just called high concept, or a situational aspect, or they're called a boost, or they're called a consequence. They all function exactly the same way. They're just called different things, so we can, as people, conceptualize them easier. If we go to damage, a consequence is an aspect, just like everything. It's easier for us to understand that it is damage because we're used to the concept of damage. But the mechanics are exactly the same. If my character has a consequence, broken left leg, we know what that means. My character can move, but it probably can't run. So my character cannot run, period. Any situation is automatically influenced by the consequences. Instead of having a number and then we try to think, well, is this like a bad or really bad or what? Because it's always written as text, understandable description of what is the truth. And it allows us also to broaden the spectrum. Like I said, you can have physical, mental, wealth or finance related, social related. You can have anything that is relevant to your campaign setting, and they all still are built in the same consequence limitations. So you can be you can be attacked in a physical way, you get a consequence. It also limits how much you can take mental attacks. It limits how much you can get social attacks, which makes the system easier for very different kinds of characters. And that's actually something that I should have said. It's one of the best things about Fate as well. I've had my original test, one of my test campaigns I did, I created basically PCs for everyone ready, and they were basically villagers with different jobs. And one of these characters happened to be the governor of that village. And they were, of course, good at what governors are good at, which is mainly people liked them, and they were good at talking. And now you take this kind of character to an adventure. Most systems will make this character completely irrelevant in an adventure. They can't climb, they can't fight, they can't really run, they're fat, they're stressed about every situation. But Fate doesn't do that. The player who had that character was active every single turn in every single scene, even when it was just normal, pure combat. And they were efficient because they were able to do what that character would do in that situation, which is lead. So they led. And they were efficient because what they did was they created advantage. And it doesn't matter what the advantage is. It doesn't matter whether you trip your opponent or whether you demoralize them. It doesn't matter if you are physically helping someone pull something or whether you are giving them tactical tips. You are giving them literally an advantage, which in mechanical ways is an aspect which can be invoked, which provides bonus, which is in Fate fixed. It will give the same bonus, always. Now I will ask if you have any questions, please.
I need your advice. So I have a long-term D&D group. We like to play like narrative way of playing. So I tried to introduce narrative-focused game system. In my case, it was Monster of the Week.
Okay.
And it was really difficult to get the players out of this turn-based or like this limited crunchy mindset. Do you have any success story of how you introduce this to players?
It takes time.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet. It takes time, and that's exactly what you need to do. You need to show them example. So first you need to get there yourself and then show them example. And that's the common complaint about Fate, is that it doesn't have tactics in it, but it does. It actually has extremely deep tactical kind of element, but it is not in the mechanics. You don't have a special ability that in certain kind of circumstance gives you a bonus to this, and if you combine it with the bonus from that, you are powerful. It is, what does your character do? What would actually be beneficial in that situation? Think yourself. Because your character in Fate can do anything. It's not like D&D that they say that you have these 7 actions and you can only do these 7 actions and nothing else. You can do anything. You choose from limitless number of options what would be in a movie scene really, really, really good move. And then you consult the rules and they will help you to implement it.
How is character progression in Fate?
Character progression is quite simple in the sense it uses normally for the skills we had here a pyramid, meaning that you can never have more higher level value than you have lower level value. So you can never have 2 + 4 and 1 + 3, for example. And you gain more skill points, kind of, normally. You gain what are called fate points, with which you can buy stunts, or you can just leave them as fate points, and then you can do everything that you can normally do with fate points. And when you keep the campaign within the same kind of scale of things, it progresses perfectly nicely. And you can actually choose any scale. You can play easily commoners, heroes, superheroes, gods, everything works perfectly, but you can't jump between those scales during a campaign easily. So progression from level 1 in D&D to level 20 doesn't work in Fate. But if you choose that we're gonna be high level, that works.
You are making comparisons to D&D, but then there are, around the same time when this was released, there's like Over the Edge and some other games that I guess have narrative-led systems or ideas. How do you compare, or at least this seems more conflict-oriented than Over the Edge?
In the sense that yes, because conflict doesn't mean battle, but conflicts are what creates drama. It gives stakes. It gives motivation, meaning. So Fate usually is about competent characters trying to achieve something, and then there is a conflict, some kind of thing that makes it difficult, that they have to overcome. How it compares with other systems, I use D&D because most people know D&D. Against other systems, like I said, I know Fate so well. I'm saying that Fate is my favorite because I started using it. I got into it. Other systems have similar features, similarities in mindset. It comes down to nuances and what really works for you. Fate gives me both a mechanical dice system, which I like a lot, and it gives me that narrative focus, and I like that combination. For example, Powered by the Apocalypse is something that it's very nice for a simple thing, but I don't like to have a campaign with it. Now I'm out of time. Thank you.